Chapter 401. Asking for a favor. That was very encouraging. Thank you. Cain laughed when he heard Neos reply. He stood up, stretching his arms above his head before rolling his shoulders. Percival, I don't know how, but make your breakthrough today. I will start training you and Neo from tomorrow. Chances are low that it will be enough to prepare you two for the grand expedition, but we need to do our best. Cain stretched again, letting out a tired yawn. What about the rest of us? Olivia asked, her arms crossed. Do whatever you want. Just don't get eaten by some hungry monster. We have a lot of those here, Cain said before making his way toward the door. After a moment of contemplation, Percival decided to go out and make his breakthrough. Olivia and Nicholas followed him, intending to protect him during his breakthrough. Neo was the only one left behind. He focused on creating essence. Time passed slowly, and soon the deep orange of the evening arrived. Cain returned, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. The rich aroma filled the room as he placed one beside Neo and sat behind him. Can I be a bit rude? Cain asked, taking a sip from his cup. Go ahead. How are you using world energy? Neo raised a brow. You can tell it's world energy? I can. It's not like you are trying to hide it, and it's too pure to be the energy of an awakener. Cain stared at Neo, his expression unreadable. What are you? Neo remained silent. I suppose you wouldn't answer me so easily. Cain exhaled through his nose, then reached into his coat and pulled out a thin book. He placed it on the table between them. Neo glanced at it. What is it? Energy concealment spell. It's useful for you since you are going to join the grand expedition soon. You wouldn't want to reveal you can use world energy to countless darkness users. Would you? Who knows? They might attack you to devour whatever is allowing you to use world energy. I thought the expedition was made up of righteous people, Neo asked with furrowed brows. Cain laughed, shaking his head. You make good jokes. The people here work together in only 3 cases. Their interests align, the top brass of the dragon clans are forcing them, or they are planning to backstab someone. He leaned forward, his fingers drumming lightly on the wooden table. The expedition members are all from the 7 dragon clans, but you can never be too safe. Anyone can be overtaken by greed. Neo looked at the spell book, then back at Cain. After a moment of contemplation, he picked it up and flipped through the pages. He confirmed that the spell was genuine and stored the book in his shadow space. I'm a heaven breaker. I see. You don't look surprised. Well, I expected it the moment I saw you using world energy. Something like that is only possible if you are a heaven breaker, or if you have the blessing of a world directly. Your world energy felt different from Moon's, and Earth would never give its world energies direct access to anyone. The only choice left was you being a heaven breaker, Cain explained. You are quite knowledgeable about heaven breakers. Of course I am. I've been trying to become one for ages. Never succeeded until now though. Cain chuckled bitterly. You satiated my curiosity, so ask anything you would like to. I know you must have a lot of questions about this place. Neo stared at Cain for a few seconds. There was a lot he wanted to ask. How was life treating Cain? Why was he on Tartarus? How did he wake up? When did he marry and have a kid? However, Neo was not someone who had the right to ask such close questions anymore. I want your help. Neo took out the ever-witch violet from his shadow space. The dark petals of the flower caught Cain's eye. That is, Cain questioned, a flower with powerful healing nature. It needs death, darkness, time, life, holy, and void elementals to bloom. Until then, it can't be used. You want my help to make it bloom? I guess Sphinx told you about my trait. He rubbed his chin with furrowed brows, then shook his head. I can't help you with that. Before Neo could say anything, Cain raised his hands and pulled his sleeves back. His hands were covered in black sigils. My trait has been sealed by these. I can't talk with elementals or use my sword. What? Who did that to you? Cain was surprised when he sensed the suppressed intensity behind Neo's words. Calm down. It's not permanent. I can deal with this myself. Only it will take time. Since you need the flower, I think you need it urgently to heal someone? Yes, you are right. Then you can't wait for my trait to be unsealed. You will have to bloom it yourself. Of course, I will still help as much as I can. Cain stood up. He walked toward the door. Follow me. They entered deep into the house. The air grew colder as the night arrived. Cain brought him to a room filled with safes. The metallic scent of stored artifacts lingered in the air. He looked over all of them and stopped in front of the safe at the end of the room. After entering the password, he opened it. Inside, several vials of blood were placed. You have a darkness element, right? Can you use it? I can. Good. Among the elements you need for the flower, how many do you have and how many can you use? Cain asked as he looked through the blood vials. I have all of them, but I can't use void, Neo answered. Although he didn't understand Cain's intentions. Cain stopped. He turned around to look at Neo, his expression shifting from curiosity to something more intense. I don't think Earth had void affinity? Yeah, it doesn't. Chapter 402 Pond. Wait. Let me get this straight. Cain massaged his brows, half shocked, half confused. You got affected by void, which led to you gaining your void affinity, and it probably reset your rank and everything. After that, you reached Paragon, became a heaven breaker. Somehow, you are walking on two paths of power. Not only that, you can use 5 elements to a sufficient degree. Cain didn't know what to say. He knew the executioners chosen by Sphinx wouldn't be normal, but Neo was above and beyond anything he could have imagined. You are right. Neo's nonchalant attitude made Cain smile bitterly. He used to think he was a genius, but meeting Neo was making him doubt that claim. Shaking his head, he returned his focus to the safe and the blood vials. He took out 7 of them and gave them to Neo. Use darkness to devour them. Ava will tell you when to do that. What are these? Concentrated bloodlines. Devouring them will allow you to use their skill temporarily. Since you can use 5 elements, I gave you 5 vials that will let you talk with elementals of your elements. As for the last 2 vials, they can let you talk with elementals of void. You haven't awakened that affinity. Hence you need 2 vials to increase your perception of them. Cain didn't know about Neo's empathic transcendence trait. His solution would work for normal demigods. For Neo, it was 100 times better. It would increase his trait's effectiveness by several folds, even if temporarily. I would love to give you more, but those are the only skills I have for this task. Cain and Neo returned to the main hall. The wooden floor creaked beneath their steps. Ava, come here. Ava arrived a few moments later. Is there anything you need, Master? Cain's eyebrow twitched at the word, Master. However, he didn't point it out, having given up on correcting the way his daughter addressed him. Take Neo to the Yasugori Pond. That place has a high concentration of all elementals. It will increase his chances of talking to them. Master, the pond is too precious. Just because they are from your homeland. Ava, we had this talk last night. Let's not do it again. Ava nodded with a clenched jaw. Neo looked at the father-daughter duo with a silent gaze. The pond was something clearly important, maybe something like a limited resource. But Neo didn't have the luxury to look for another method. Follow me. Ava and Neo left the 2-floor house. The air outside was crisp, carrying the scent of earth and distant foliage. They navigated through the forest for hours. Towering trees cast long shadows over them, their branches swaying gently in the wind. Most of the monsters stayed away after sensing Ava's dragon aura. The ones that approached were quickly dispatched by her. The duo stopped before a small hill. They stepped onto the broken staircase, hidden at the corner of the mountain's foot. It was covered in fallen leaves, cobwebs, and the steps were cracked and uneven. As the two walked forward, Neo opened his mouth. Your dad is quite hospitable. You are right, Ava replied with a hint of pride. Not many people know it, but he is very kind. Not many people know it? Neo noticed the nuance behind Ava's words. It seemed as if Cain did not have a good image in Tartarus. They are too afraid of Master to notice the kindness in his actions. Before Neo could ask more, they reached the mountaintop. It was a small, flat area. The air was clearer here, filled with energies that made Neo's skin tingle. A massive tree stood at the side. Its roots twisted into the rocky ground, while a shimmering pond lay in the center. The water was still yet held an ethereal glow, reflecting the sky above like a mirror. Neo could feel the huge amount of elementals present in the area. This pond, Yasogori, has a special property that attracts elementals. By sacrificing it in small amounts, you can ask for favors from them. Neo raised his brow. It was a lot better than he had imagined. Take out the things Master gave you. He brought out the blood vials from his shadow space and prepared to enter the pond. Is there anything I need to be careful about? The amount of elementals you can talk to at once depends on your mental capacity. Don't try to be greedy and talk with too many of them. And wait, stop. What? Why are you entering the pond like that? Remove your clothes. Ava looked at him with an annoyed gaze. Is that necessary? Yes. Neo clicked his tongue. Even if he wasn't embarrassed normally, this situation was different. He didn't want to get naked in front of Ava, who was like his niece to him. Remove the clothes, Ava said with narrowed eyes. Yasogori is a sacred place belonging to our ancestors. Stepping into it clothed is rude. Neo nodded. He followed her words and removed his clothes, placing them neatly on a nearby rock. The air was cold against his bare skin, sending a brief shiver down his spine as he stepped closer to the pond. Ava's eyes widened slightly when she noticed his scars. Under the faint glow of the moon, crisscrossing lines of old wounds marred his body. She had expected Neo to be a mage since his mind was powerful, but given the state of his body, he was a warrior, one who had seen more fights than she could have imagined. What do I do now? Acha! Ava flinched, her train of thoughts coming to a screeching halt when she heard Neo. She had to gather her bearings before she answered. Devour the vials. Since they are concentrated bloodlines, you will gain their skills. It will increase your perception towards elementals. Then, you can use the Yasogori as a bargaining chip for whatever you want. Keep in mind that you shouldn't try to talk to a large amount of elementals at once. Even one with your mind will break if you go overboard, Ava explained again and again. Neo nodded and took out the ever-witch violet. Ava seemed to recognize the flower, but Neo wasn't paying attention to her. Chapter 403, Elementals. He used darkness to devour the blood vials. For a moment, nothing was different. It felt the same as he usually did while devouring things. Then, suddenly, a rush of power exploded within his body. Bloodline? Devoured. Gained bloodline? Damaged. Bloodline? Devoured. Gained bloodline. Bloodline? Devoured. Bloodline. Neo doubled over. His insides started to feel hot. It was as if he was being burnt. The bloodlines stored in the blood vials started to seep into his veins. They tried to usurp his original bloodlines and replace them. Affinity towards death element is being strengthened due to your new bloodline skill. Affinity towards darkness element is being strengthened due to your new. Affinity towards life element is being strengthened. Affinity towards time element. Affinity towards holy. Neo felt as if he was gaining new senses. It was overwhelming. His mind was being bombarded with huge amounts of information. This feels the same as when I had yet to control my intent senses. He struggled to stand straight. His intense senses started to go haywire. Unknown voices spoke to him, and he could feel countless tiny hands grabbing him. Neo, 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 Neo. Why are you trying to talk to us? Child, you should stop. This is killing you. The space around him seemed to warp and twist, the air thick with elemental energy. Red, black, and green motes of light floated around him, illuminating the night with their eerie glow. Neo recognized them as death, darkness, and life elementals. There were more present. Time holy. Their colors were unique. It was Neo's first time seeing something like that. Death and time observed him silently. Holy floated around him curiously. Life healed his body, which was rapidly breaking apart. Darkness tried to cover him, protecting him from the flood of information that was harming his mind. Neo felt like his mind would burst. The pain was hard to describe. His mind was being stretched impossibly thin and used as a medium by the elementals to converse. The more elementals appeared, the thinner his mind was stretched. If not for Neo being a heavenbreaker and having a powerful mind, he would have died the moment he tried something absurd like this. Do whatever you are planning quickly. You don't have much time left, Ava shouted, her voice strained with urgency. Neo struggled to breathe. He couldn't even think properly, but he spoke, his body driven by instinct to complete his goal. I want all of you to help me bloom this flower. Darkness elementals moved before he had completed his words. They flowed into the flower, helping its petals bloom ever so slightly. The flow of elementals increased the burden on Neo's mind, but he was thankful to them. Darkness listened to him easily. You want to save the tyrant? She will kill more when she is saved. The life elementals healed Neo but refused to flow into the flower. I will give you guys the water from this pond. If you help me, Neo said with gritted teeth. He had to hurry. He could feel his mind on the verge of being completely broken. Even if he revived, he had to start from the beginning, so he had to get it done in one go. Time elementals never said anything. Neo sensed some sort of unhappy emotions within them, but they moved. After absorbing a bit of the water from the pond, they flowed into the flower. The flower bloomed a bit more. Holy elementals followed soon after. Don't forget we helped you. Their presence caused the bloom to reach halfway. Only death and life remained. Neo wanted to say something to convince them, but he could hardly move. The water around him had turned red from the blood pouring out of his nerves that constantly burst. The darkness, time, and holy elementals swirled around him, flowing into the flower in huge quantities. Every elemental that helped him consumed a small amount of water from the Yasugori pond. It was negligible amount for a single elemental. However, given the huge numbers of elementals, the amount they took continued to pile, causing the pond to rapidly shrink. I wanted to wait until I got others' help before talking with Void, but I don't have that much time. Neo grabbed the last 2 remaining blood vials and devoured them. Bloodline? Devoured. Gained bloodline? Damaged. Affinity towards void element is being strengthened due to your new bloodline skill. Suddenly, everything felt silent. Took Neo a moment to realize he had lost his hearing. He raised his head, using what was left of his intent vision, to stare at the violet motes of light floating in the sky. The void corrupts you. The void elementals floated towards him. They were beautiful. Their surface shimmered, and tiny violet suns seemed to exist within each of them. Neo reached out his hand, trying to grab them. Snap out of it! If not for Moon's intent shouting at him, Neo would have remained transfixed. He pulled his hand back swiftly when he realized what he was doing. Why did you call for us? The void elementals seemed relaxed. On the other hand, death and life had turned hostile. The 2 elementals faced the void elementals as if they had met a sworn enemy. The violet motes of light ignored death and life. Their focus was directed at Neo. Neo fell before he could complete his words. The burden brought by void elementals pushed him beyond his limits. His bloodlines started to burn. The new bloodlines tried to take over while the original 2 fought back. The pond was slick with his blood, pooling around him as his body convulsed. Neo's body writhed. His veins glowed faintly, alternating between dark crimson and a sickly green as the new and old bloodlines clashed. The pain was excruciating. His muscles tightened and his bones felt as if they were being crushed. Chapter 404. Elementals 2. His body was beet red. Veins bulged and wriggled as he struggled to breathe. Flower your help. Red lightning, a soft green glow, and purple bubbles with miniature suns within them floated around Neo. Death and life were wary of void, which was surprising. Just like how void could corrupt life, death could harm life too. A powerful death would have no trouble killing a weak life. It seemed contradictory that life was fine with death, but not void. The elementals remained stationary. They seemed to have no intention of helping. The pond should have made them help Neo, But life seemed to have a personal bias against Elizabeth. Death also refused to help, and Void just watched, as if the pond didn't interest it. Neo, on the verge of fainting, suddenly felt the presence of another group of elementals. Silvery motes appeared around him. "Please help him," the space elementals spoke. They had tried to not manifest, since it put a great burden on Neo. However, given the situation, they had no other choice. When the other elementals remained silent, Space spoke again. "Death, he is the spawn of your loved one. Why are you refusing to help him? You said it yourself. He is the spawn of my loved one. A life that was created by one who was blessed by death." The Death Elemental's voice was filled with suppressed intensity. The red lightning surrounding Neo grew erratic. "We have no intention of helping the mistake of my loved one." "Calling him a mistake," the Space Elemental sighed. "You act as if you hate your loved one and his spawn. But have you not helped the little one until now? Whenever he needed your help, you protected him. You were the reason why he learned to manifest his death. So why are you not helping when he asked for it directly?" The Space said. "Why you?" The powerful red lightning crashed against the pond's edges and caused the surroundings to wilt. "I never helped him." The Death Elementals turned to Neo. "I did no such thing. Do not listen to him." Neo chuckled weakly. He remembered the events during the Shadow Trial. Back then, he had lost the mastery of death for a period of time. During those times, death still warned him when someone tried to attack him. Something like that shouldn't have been possible. It only happened since the Death Elementals tried to protect him. This was something Neo realized only now. Neo understood what he needed to do in order to receive Death's grace. "Death, help me, please. Do you think we will do it just because you asked sincerely?" Death snapped at him. Death alternated its focus between the flower and Neo, who seemed in immense pain. Neo groans made it wince. "Ugh, fine. Just this once. But don't expect us to help you again." The storm of red lightning began to flow into the ever-witch Violet. Some of the Death Elementals took the water from the pond, while others did not. Even though all of them were helping, they seemed to be capable of making their own decisions. "Why go to this extent, child?" Life questioned. "The woman is a merciless killer. She is the antithesis of you, who sacrificed himself to save the world." "Because I promised to save her." Life watched him wordlessly for a brief moment before it moved. The elementals of life took the water of the pond and flowed into the flower. The flower was on the verge of attaining a complete bloom. Only one more, and Neo would be able to save Elizabeth. "Void, you have harmed the blessed of the ones who follow our path, Hargraves. So, give us one argument. One reason why we should help you." Neo frowned. The elementals seemed to be aware of the Shadow Trial events. Had the Shadow Supreme told them others about what transpired back then? That was the only reason Neo could think of for the reason why elementals of other elements were aware of it. But how much did the news spread that every single elemental knows about it? Neo chuckled amidst the pain. Given the events, it seemed the Shadow Supreme was quite a braggart, who happily spoke about his champions. "The blessed of the ones who follow your path." Does that mean Valkyria? Neo spoke, trying to keep his tone calm and even. "I did no such thing. The one I harmed was created by shadows." "That is sophistry, Hargraves, not argument." "What do you expect me to say?" "Someone came knocking at my door with a gun. Of course I fought back. It matters to us not. What we care about is we lost one who walked on our path." Neo felt it. Void did not care about Valkyria. What it wanted was something else. Not the pond, not the justification, but something else. "Void, why are you forcing the child to walk on your path?" Space spoke. "We did no such thing." The Void spoke offhandedly, yet it was now clear to Neo. Void wanted him. Why? He didn't understand. He could think about it later. "I will do my best to awaken my Void affinity," Neo said. The Void elementals remained silent. They seemed pleased, expectant. Neo could not put a finger on the intent he sensed from them. It confused him as to why Void was eager to have him walk its path. Do not forget what you have said now, Hargraves, and do not make us wait for long. Crossing us will cost you much. Without another word, the purple bubbles flowed into the flower. Its petals unfurled as it reached maturity. Neo ignored the storm of elementals covering him and turned to space. Thank you. It was a transaction. There is no need to thank us. The silvery motes of light disappeared. The storm of elementals became the source of nourishment for the flower. It began to bloom beautifully. An ethereal light covered the petals, and the flower floated above Neo's hand. Chapter 405. Dragon Blood, Fusing Bloodline Fragments. Neo could sense a different sense of power emanating from the flower. It wasn't strong per se, but still strong. There was something different, something unique about Violet Everwitch. Its glowing petals were mesmerizing. They seemed to be inviting, hoping he would consume it. Its enchanting grasp held dominion over his mind. He almost absorbed it when suddenly a sharp pain tore through his veins, and he stopped. The battle between his bloodlines had reached the climax. The new bloodlines held a numeric advantage. However, they were damaged. They should have been ejected, instead of being able to usurp Neo's original bloodline. Something astonishing happened at that moment. The bloodline Monarch of Death swelled. Enraged, it grabbed the invading bloodlines and started to devour them. Bloodline combination. It was a rare event. It only happened when two bloodlines were similar, and the weaker bloodline would be devoured, empowering the stronger bloodline. But Monarch of Death and the invading bloodlines couldn't be more different. They were not similar at all. Neo, confused, tried to stop his bloodline. He wasn't enthused to find out what would happen if his bloodline devoured a bloodline that was completely different from it. Before he could do anything, the invading bloodlines had been eaten completely. Neo blinked, stupefied. The pain suddenly stopped. He felt as if a volcano on the verge of explosion was brewing within him. Collected bloodline? Fragment X1. Collected bloodline? Fragment. Collected bloodline? Frag. Collected bloodline? Collected bloodle. Collected. Collect. The bloodlines weren't named, but Neo could see he had gained 6 bloodline fragments, each belonging to a different bloodline. I took 6 different bloodline vials and gained 6 fragments. Monarch of Death could do something like this. To say he was surprised would be an understatement. Monarch of Death had overpowered the invading bloodlines and not even allowed them to leave. His bloodline had forced them to give everything to it. It has been detected that bloodline fragments X6 are compatible with Mind Invasion bloodline. Would you like to fuse the bloodline fragments X6 into Mind Invasion bloodline? Please note, if you can gather more bloodline fragments of the same bloodlines, it is possible to gain their original bloodline. Proceed/deny. While staring at the screen, Neo had forgotten the state of his body. If not for Ava appearing at his side just in time and holding him, his head would have crashed into the blood-soaked pond. She helped him come out of the pond. Thank you. How did you do that? She asked instead of replying to his thanks. The raw ability to devour other bloodlines and force them to integrate into oneself is something only dragons have. Are you a dragon? Her golden eyes seemed to stare into his soul. Neo opened his mouth to refuse but stopped halfway through. Was he a dragon? As far as he knew, dragons had different kinds of bloodlines themselves. Maybe Hades' bloodline belonged to some ancient dragon clan, which later evolved into Monarch of Death. That would explain why my bloodline can do something that only dragons should be capable of. Why aren't you answering? Ava asked, breaking his train of thought. I don't know, Neo answered truthfully. I'll ask my dad about it when I can meet him. Ava felt he was dodging her question. How long would that take? She pressed. I don't know. Ava frowned, ticked off. Neo had consumed more than half of Yasagori Pond. It would take over a century for the pond to recover to its previous state. Instead of being thankful and answering a question of hers, Neo was lying about something that was blatantly clear. I really don't know, Neo said, sensing her emotions. I've never met my dad in my life, and I don't know how long it is going to take. She seemed unconvinced, so he added, The partial reason I came to this world is because I came to meet my parents if I become strong enough. Suddenly, Ava's mind turned deathly silent. Is that true? She asked hesitantly. I'm afraid it is, Neo answered with a chuckle. His smile only made his words seem more true, making Ava think he was hiding his pain behind the smile. She started to feel a sense of kinship. The shift in her state of mind surprised Neo. What the hell is happening with your family, Kane? He kept his thoughts to himself, knowing Ava wouldn't answer him. Besides, he had a more important task at hand. He stared at the flower. It seemed to be enticing him to consume it. Neo had been caught in the flower's bewitchment the first time, but he didn't fall for it again, being prepared. Who are you going to use it on? Ava suddenly asked. Someone who was injured because of me. She looked at the flower as if wondering something. Unlike the time when they were climbing the mountain and Ava acted as if she was being forced to help Neo, this time she spoke genuinely. Don't use it. That is the flower of a witch. It will turn anyone who consumes it into a true witch. She pursed her lips and quickly added, True witches are born from those flowers. I don't know how you got your hands on something that precious, but it's a cursed object. Okay, stop. Neo raised his hand to stop her from sputtering. Talk slowly, and explain it in simpler words. It was only then Neo realized they had been talking in the same language. Kane must have taught her our world's language, he thought. Ava, not knowing his thoughts, opened her mouth. I've read books from our clan's library. One of the books there had information about that flower. It explained that the witches were born from it. What's a witch? An immortal. Oh. Neo frowned. What's so bad about it? You can't die. No matter how hard you try, you will live. Always. For eternity. Her words thundered in his head. Neo had forgotten what eternity entailed. In fact, he did remember it. But he had come to embrace and appreciate it. What about others? Chapter 406. Triple Breakthrough. Would they appreciate eternity like him, or would they curse it? He stared at the flower. A screen, detailed inspect, appeared before his eyes. It was a sub-skill of the Sphinx's blessing. Everwitch Violet. Rank? Effect. Heals all injuries, ailments, and negative status upon consumption. Additionally, the legends have it that anybody who consumes this flower will become immortal. Neo clenched his jaw. Should he use it on Elizabeth? Can I find a powerful healer in this world? Neo asked Ava. No, Ava replied bluntly. Almost everyone here is a darkness user. No one has life and holy elements. As for the ones who do, they aren't above expert mastery, just like other element users. Something about her words was off. However, Neo was focused on something else. A flower that grants immortality. Why didn't I realize it can be a curse to others? He finally understood why life had been so vehement about not helping him. Logically, life should have helped him, since healing others was in its basic nature. But it hadn't done that. The reason was that it knew immortality can be a curse. It must be why life doesn't see death as an enemy, because death helps everyone to pass on. It does that before living can become a curse for them. Neo's thoughts continued to churn. What about asking for a Grim Reaper's help? In Tartarus, its world of the living and underworld were one and the same. Earth's Grim Reapers should be able to exert influence here, unlike Earth where they couldn't act in the world of the living. Neo held his Grim Reaper badge. It didn't work. Without being able to open the portal to the underworld, he couldn't ask Grim Reapers to help. Damn it, he murmured. The only way left out is the executioners. Percival had holy affinity, and Olivia had life. The problem is Percival. He is far too weak to purify Elizabeth's corruption. In the first place, would they even help me? Neo doubted it. Elizabeth, for better or worse, was an enemy for most, if not all, exalted on Luminera. A plan started to form in Neo's mind. He went over it repeatedly. It should work. In theory, at least. If everything works out, I should be able to save Elizabeth without using the flower. If not, only 19 days remained until the timer to save Elizabeth ended. Neo had to make his choices fast. Neo, Ava said when he remained silent for a bit too long. Sorry. I was focused on my bloodlines, he said. Can I get a free space? I need to make a breakthrough. He wasn't lying. Empathic Transcend had reached a whopping 100% after his last stunt, and Crownless King was at 40%. Training until he reached the edge of death always had its advantage. This was without fusing the bloodline fragments into mind invasion, which was the bloodline of Empathic Transcend. Breakthrough. Yes. The incident with the elementals helped me reach the limit. Come with me. For a moment, Ava thought about letting him break through where they stood, but she decided against it. The pond wouldn't provide any benefits to Neo's breakthrough, and it would be rude to her ancestors if he did that here. She took him to another mountain, this one much larger. Its peak was shrouded in mist, and the air carried the faint scent of damp earth and ancient presence. A powerful barrier surrounded it, shimmering faintly under the sky. I use this place mostly for training. It should be enough to contain the aftermath of your breakthrough, Ava said, her voice steady as she gestured toward the rugged terrain. Neo nodded, stepping forward before settling onto the ground in a cross-legged position. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes as he focused inward. The world energy within his body began to churn. It surged through his veins. A faint hum filled the air, and then white flames materialized around him. The flames flickered wildly, casting ghostly shadows across the rocky landscape. The air trembled. The ground beneath him cracked, sending fine fissures spiderwebbing outward. Trees groaned in protest as the force of his aura sent powerful shockwaves rolling through the valley. A flock of birds erupted from the trees in a panicked frenzy as they tried to run away, their cries drowned out by the growing storm of energy. Then, all at once, his presence underwent a terrifying transformation. It expanded violently, slamming against the barrier like an unrelenting tidal wave. Empathic Transcendence, Grade 5, Grade 4. Crownless King, Grade 5. Progress, 40%, 70%. Neo had grown considerably stronger, but he didn't stop there. Fused the bloodlines. A sudden pulse surged through his body as his Monarch of Death bloodline bubbled with energy. The power condensed, flowing through his veins before merging into the depths of his mind invasion bloodline. A flood of knowledge and understanding surged through his mind. Empathic Transcendence, Grade 4, Progress, 0%, 100%. Crownless King, Grade 5, Progress, 70%, 100%. Ava had thought Neo had completed his breakthrough. It surprised her that this amount of energy was released from someone who was a paragon. She had barely taken a breath when Neo's presence swelled once more. This time, 1,000 times stronger. A look of shock appeared in her eyes. The cracks in the mountain's barrier spread like shattered glass. The land beneath them heaved, splitting apart as the mountain trembled violently, its foundation quaking under the sheer force of his growing presence. Neo's body evolved. His muscles condensed, packed with a density rivaling the core of a collapsing star. The power within him brimmed with endless potential, each fiber of his being capable of shattering worlds with a single strike. A portion of his scars disappeared. His appearance improved. His bones, now infused with endless world energy, resonated with power beyond comprehension. And then, with one final, shattering pulse, the barrier surrounding the mountain collapsed. The explosion of energy sent debris flying, carving deep trenches into the land. Neo exhaled, his breath misting in the cool night air. He stood, his figure silhouetted against the backdrop of a sky now shimmering with residual energy. His breakthrough was complete. Chapter 407. Training in easy mode, lie. He jumped to his feet. His body felt light and much more powerful. His control had improved drastically. At the same time, his senses' range had reached unprecedented heights. If Neo focused, he could sense the blades of grass as far as thousands of kilometers. He noticed Ava staring at him stiffly. Is something wrong? She looked at the barrier that shouldn't have been broken by even early exalted, then back to Neo. Swallowing her doubts, She shook her head. Let's return. Neo nodded. He used water and darkness to clean the filth that had been released by his body during the breakthrough and followed after Ava. I'm sorry about the barrier. I didn't think it would break. Don't worry about it. It has a self-restoration function. Ava felt relieved that she hadn't told Neo to break through at the Yasagori pond. Had she done that, the pond might have disappeared by now. They reached the home in a few hours. The journey could have been much shorter. However, they took their time, as according to Ava, there were powerful monsters lurking in the forest, and attracting their attention was dangerous. Cain was at the porch. He was waiting for them, half worried, half expectant. Good job, he said, sensing the endless power emanating from Neo. You should be able to fight a weak grade 3 exalted now. Is that so? Neo smiled bitterly. Cain's words smashed the delusion of invincibility he was feeling. On the other hand, Ava was petrified. Neo had jumped from being able to fight grade 5 grade 4 exalted to grade 3 exalted in a single day. According to her master, Neo was a paragon. It made no sense how a single breakthrough of his could rival the breakthroughs of exalted. Come inside. I prepared lunch. The others should be here in a few minutes too. For hours earlier, Olivia and Nicholas surveyed the forest. They guarded the perimeter with utmost vigilance, making sure Percival's breakthrough was not interrupted. What are you planning to do? Nicholas suddenly asked. Olivia was surprised. It was rare for Nicholas to initiate a conversation. About what? The boy. Nicholas kept his eyes on the surroundings as he opened his mouth. If he became an executioner, it's sufficient to say Sphinx made him an offer he couldn't refuse. It's likely that it was to save the tyrant who was injured during the attack on the Temple of Void. Even if the offer wasn't about it, the boy must be trying to save the tyrant, Nicholas said. I'm not going to do anything, Olivia replied bluntly. Why? He is the prince of the underworld, and my daughter is there. The Reapers of Death are impartial. Even if the boy wants to harm you, he cannot do anything against your daughter. I would rather not take risks. All their knowledge about the underworld came from rumors, myths, and claims of the Temple of Death. It was said the angels of death were impartial, but was it really true? Olivia had too much on the line to take the gamble. Good to know that, Nicholas said curtly, eliciting a surprise from Olivia. You are okay with that? I thought you would want to eliminate Neo, especially because of his bloodline. I'm not young anymore. I would rather not fight if I can. Nicholas shook his head and stepped away from Olivia. I can sense a powerful monster coming for Percival from that direction. I will go look into it. Before he could take another step, Olivia asked again. Will you really not attack Neo? I won't. Even if I wanted to, I can't do it. The dragon protecting him is beyond what these old bones can handle. Present. The group ate dinner. Percival and his group returned late. They had encountered a powerful grade 3 exalted rank monster, which took them time to subdue. After dinner, they sat on the porch. I'm a paragon now. So, when can we start the training? Percival asked eagerly. From the morning, Cain replied with a wave of his hand. The birds don't wake up until the sun rises. Oh! His cryptic words confused the group. However, they kept their silence. They would know tomorrow what Cain was talking about. There was no need for haste. Instead of sleeping, Neo meditated. He created essence and learned the concealment spell Cain had given him. It was not hard to learn. However, learning it by the time he met the grand expedition would be a challenge. The morning came quickly. As the first light of dawn touched the forest, Cain led Neo and Percival through the trees. The air was cool, and the ground was covered in fallen leaves. Birds chirped in the distance, and a soft breeze rustled the branches. After traveling for hours, they stopped in front of a long fence that stretched far in both directions. A large wooden sign was nailed to the entrance. Do not cross the fence unless you can outrun the ostriches. Neo and Percival stared at the sign. Ostrich? Percival asked, confused. You guys have those here? Yeah, Cain replied simply. What is this place? A farm, Cain said. Each side of the fence is 1.5 kilometers long. There's a single golden apple tree in the middle of the farm. That tree is why I created this farm. Just one tree. Golden apples are rare and hard to grow. Having even one tree that bears fruits is extremely lucky as is. Percival nodded, looking a little unsure. He had heard many terrifying stories about the first executioner, but the man standing before him seemed surprisingly normal. Neo, however, wasn't paying attention to the conversation. His eyes scanned the farm. Something felt strange. "What's our goal here?" he asked. "Bring me a golden apple, one each. I want to make an apple tart." Cain smirked. "That's our training?" "Yeah." Cain shrugged. "Pretty easy, right? I used to send Ava to do it for me." Neo turned his gaze to the farm. The tree was only 1.5 kilometers away, combining the distance they need to cover in total. For someone like them, who could cross over 100 kilometers in a single step, this task was easy. Too easy. "I have a bad feeling about this," Neo thought. Chapter 408. Prison. Percival, either too confident or too eager, grinned and cracked his neck. "So if I pluck the apple and bring it back, you'll admit I'm strong enough to join the expedition?" "Yes, I would acknowledge you." Cain nodded. "And if I bring it back before Neo?" Percival questioned. "You get a bigger slice of the tart. If that tart is as special as it sounds, I'd love a big portion." Percival laughed. Neo remained silent, still staring at the farm. He entered the farm with a jump over the fence. His body blurred as he shot forward at breakneck speed. He covered half of the distance in an instant. Neo blinked, and everything had changed. Percival's body was rolling through the farm. A hole had been shot open in his head, and his eyes were lifeless. What? Percival was dead. Neo had not seen what or how killed him, but Percival was deader than dead. "Huh! It's been a long time since I saw a knockout that bad." He should have started at full power instead of trying to test the water with his Paragon rank speed. Cain chuckled. "Isn't it a problem that he is dead?" Neo questioned. "It's not. Not here at least. This place is Tartarus. A prison if you have forgotten," Cain said. "Look closely towards his corpse. You should be able to see it with your mastery of death." Neo wanted to point out he was blind. He couldn't see, but he guessed it wasn't the time for jokes, and did as he was told. It was easy to notice what Cain was trying to show him. Percival's soul floated above his corpse. "How did I die?" The soul muttered, shocked. "I might have forgotten to mention it, but the ostriches here are fast, and they love brain juice," Cain said from the side. "And no, you aren't dead. Wait for a few minutes." Percival was stunned beyond measure. It took him a moment to realize that they were currently under the rules of Tartarus, not Earth. Here, the world of the living and the dead were the same. Since the body died, the soul remained behind. Percival's surprise only increased when his previous body disintegrated and disappeared, and he gained a new body. His organs materialized out of thin air, his muscles regrew along with his bones, and he regained his hair and skin. It took out a lot of his divine energy. But, "I'm alive." Instead of being happy or thrilled, Percival was confused. "No, you aren't alive. You are dead. You just got a new body. Every time you die here in Tartarus, the same will happen. So everyone here is immortal." "Technically, yes. You are immortal until you become an immortal monster. Your soul dies, or a darkness devourer gets you." The last two scenarios were easy to understand. They would die truly if their soul died, and a darkness user could devour their souls, which would result in the same. Something like this was true as the seed of existence was often linked with the soul. Destruction of soul was near irreversible, and led to destruction of the seed of existence. Neo was an exception. He could easily regenerate his soul from scratch. "Now that you guys know you can't die, get to it." Neo felt there was a lot Cain was not telling them yet. However, he decided to wait for it. If Cain was holding information, it was probably for a reason. "How do I get back to the starting point?" Percival asked. "Or should I start moving towards the tree from here itself? The ostriches won't attack you if you walk. They only attack when they see something not similar to them, and it's moving fast. And if you want, you can resume your run from there itself. Percival was no longer smiling. He looked towards the tree that was only 500 meters away. Shaking his head, he returned to the fence where Neo and Cain stood. Why did you come back? No point in training if I cheat like that. In other words, he wouldn't feel satisfied. Neo entered the farm and stretched. How fast are those things? He asked. Around as fast as a mid or high grade 2 exalted. If you guys can outrun them, then you won't have any trouble escaping if you encounter an enemy that's out of your league. Grade 2. Neo wondered if he had misheard. The gap between each grade in the exalted rank was gigantic. The chasm was so big that a lower rank grade could never hope to defeat a higher rank grade. This training would also help in building your stamina. So do your best, Cain spoke, as if he had not just told them to outpace enemies that were way beyond their current limits. The training was absurd, borderline madness. Pitting them against monsters who were as fast as grade 2 exalted was too much. But they had to participate in the grand expedition. If they couldn't survive this, they would be the first to die in the abyss of nightmares. Neo used shadow jump to move. He moved only a few hundred meters when something stomped on the shadow he was moving through. A powerful pulse drilled into his head, disorienting him. It caused him to cancel his spell involuntarily. Suddenly, he felt a sense of danger. Alarms rang in his mind. It was soon followed by a stab to his head. Although he had sensed it beforehand, the attack had been too quick, and he couldn't react on time. Much to Percival and Cain's surprise, it was nothing for Neo. He continued to run. Even if he can use death to delay dying, there should be a slight delay in movements, Cain thought. Looks like he is used to dying a lot of times. He laughed. There are a lot of people who can do something like that here. If the training could be done just by doing that, I wouldn't have chosen it. Chapter 409. Infinite Mana. Neo activated his blessing. His speed increased sharply, and his injuries began to heal. He shot forward like a bullet. The world blurred around him. The distant rustling of leaves and the chirping of the birds faded into the background. Just as he took a step, something struck his shin. He tripped, his momentum betraying him, and fell face-first into the ground. The impact sent a jolt of pain through his body as dust and loose dirt scattered into the air. Fweet! 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 Neo groaned, pushing himself up, only to find an ostrich towering over him. The oversized bird stood there, its beady eyes gleaming with what could only be amusement. Neo blinked, baffled. Short head, long neck, shaggy feathers, two-toed feet with sharp claws. It looked like an actual ostrich. If Neo hadn't been tripped and killed by them before, he would have thought these were just normal ostriches. But, Fweet! Fweet! Is it just me? Or is this bird brain laughing at me? The ostrich stamped its feet, unmistakably taunting. Its beak curled slightly in what could only be described as a smirk, an irritating, smug smirk. After one last mocking call, the bird took a step and disappeared in a blink. Neo sat up straight, his hands digging into the dirt as he turned to look at Percival and Cain. Cain had a knowing smile. He had expected this. Percival, on the other hand, was doubled over, clutching his stomach as he laughed uncontrollably. Neo stood up, dusting himself off. His gaze shifted to the tree he had been aiming for, but the fruit no longer interested him. His main goal changed. He would bash the face of that bird brain first, then take the apple. Why the fuck are you laughing? I never thought I'd see someone getting trolled by a bird. Percival wheezed, barely containing his amusement. You got killed by it. At least I could move, unlike you. Percival shrugged, as if saying getting killed was still better than being humiliated. Ha! This is fun. Percival finally calmed down, setting his massive hammer down and rolling his shoulders. But I'd rather not die again. So, I'll finish it now. He took a step forward. Come, sunshine. A second sun materialized in the sky, blazing brilliantly above them. The temperature spiked, and waves of heat rippled through the air. Basking in divine light, Percival's aura flared, surging in intensity. Golden flames erupted around him. His muscles tensed, and veins glowed faintly beneath his skin with golden hue. A slight, almost imperceptible shift occurred in his gaze, his irises burning with newfound strength. The blessing of Apollo. Might, Neo thought. Percival had effectively reached the strength of a grade 3 exalted. Without hesitation, he bolted towards the tree. The air exploded around him, shockwaves rippling outward, and he left a blazing trail of golden fire behind him. Neo raised a brow at the sheer speed when Percival's body jerked violently. His momentum cut off instantly, and he collapsed like a puppet with its strings severed. A hole had been drilled clean through his head. He was dead. Seriously. His soul hovered over his lifeless body, staring at the corpse incredulously. I couldn't even react in time. Apollo's blessing was the strongest in terms of raw power. To die so easily after activating it came as a shock. The golden flames that had once surrounded him were now extinguished, leaving only the scorched ground. Percival's thoughts were interrupted when he noticed Neo's faint smile. His lips twitched. I died because I was careless. Sure. His body disintegrated, turning to dust before vanishing entirely. A moment later, a new body materialized around his soul, whole and unscathed. He exhaled and walked back to the starting point. Your turn, Percival said, rolling his shoulders. You two might want to work together on this one. Kane suddenly interjected with a hint of amusement. Those birds aren't easy to defeat. I can do it myself. I don't need the help of others. Percival and Neo glanced at each other as their words overlapped. Kane frowned but said nothing. Then, after a brief pause, Percival spoke. The training is for us to participate in the grand expedition. I know teamwork is important, but we will fall short if we are too weak individually. Kane alternated his gaze between Neo and Percival before sighing. Do as you wish, but keep in mind you only have 5 days. He flicked his wrist, and out of nowhere, a wooden chair appeared. He sat down leisurely, smirking. I would recommend teamwork, but solo is also fine. No reason for me to refuse something that gets me a good laugh. Percival's lips twitched at the blatant insult. Neo, however, focused on something else entirely. Where did that chair come from? His brows furrowed. The more he thought about it, the more questions arose. Now that I think about it, Kane appeared out of nowhere when I met him. How did he do that? Kane doesn't have space affinity. He shouldn't be able to manipulate space since he lacks the spatial perception that space affinity users have. If he tries to manipulate space, he should fall through dimensions like I did. Neo recalled Kane mentioning the pseudogap. The pseudogap must be how he can do that. This could be the key to completing his training. While Neo was lost in thought, Percival had begun his attempts already. Again and again he charged forward. Again and again he was killed. Each time his body dissolved and reformed at the starting point. The cycle repeated without pause. I should start as well, Neo muttered. He triggered the Artemis blessing. A surge of power coursed through him as his control over the dark-type element increased. Then he used his own blessing. His strength, elemental control, and elemental power shot through the roof. The ground beneath his feet cracked slightly, unable to withstand the sudden spike in pressure. Using 2 buff-type blessings was incredibly draining on his world energy reserves, and it put a heavy strain on his body. A sharp, internal ache was spreading through his muscles. Neo didn't care. He activated infinite mana, another buff from the moon's blessing, to work as the source of energy for the 2 skills gained from his blessings. Chapter 410, Hateful Birds. It helped his not waste his own world energy reserves. Thanks to infinite mana, he could use both buffs infinitely without worrying about running out of juice. How many blessings do you have? Kane muttered from the side, slightly surprised. His eyes narrowed as he studied Neo's figure. And is that okay? Even if Artemis Blessing can help you activate the blessings infinitely, it doesn't remove the burden on your body. Kane leaned back and crossed his arms. Your body will break slowly from the inside. I have a way, Neo replied. He triggered the third stage of his blessing, Spring Bloom. The sudden surge from previous buffs was immense. They were so strong they tore his body apart from insides, but the Spring Bloom healed him. His wounds stitched themselves back together instantly. The pain barely had time to register before it faded away. His muscles, his bones, even his internal organs, everything was healing at a pace that defied reason. Activating so many abilities placed an unbearable strain on his soul and mind. A normal demigod, even if exalted, would have collapsed under the pressure. But it didn't matter to Neo. Spring Bloom could heal his soul, and his mind was incredibly powerful. As a Heavenbreaker, there were only a few who could rival him in his specialty. His mental resilience bordered on monstrous. He could maintain this state for days, if not weeks. In other words, right now, Neo had effectively become an unkillable, undying machine, 4 times stronger than his base state. Neo cracked his knuckles. "You look hyped up," Cain observed. "Yeah. I've never felt better." Until now, Neo had never kept his blessings active due to the immense cost of world energy. Infinite mana solved that problem for him. His body shot forward. The space around him twisted violently, torn apart by the sheer force of his movement. The wind howled in protest, forming a sonic boom in his wake. Neo sensed 2 attacks from different directions, both aimed at his head. He ducked and kept moving. The ostriches suddenly appeared out of thin air. Their attacks missed, taken by surprise by Neo's impossible speed. Their beady eyes widened in shock. Only 300 meters remained until the golden apple tree. Without warning, an ostrich leg appeared out of thin air, directly in his path. Neo's eyes widened. Before he could react, his foot collided with it. Being caught off guard surprised him. His focus broke, and for a brief moment the blessings stopped. The collision broke his momentum. Neo crashed. His body rolled violently across the ground, dirt and grass flying up in his wake. He gritted his teeth as he finally slammed into something hard, forcing him to stop. A low, mocking whistle rang in his ears. "Fweet!" Neo groaned. His vision cleared and he turned his head. The damned birdbrain was grinning. It stood before him, smug and victorious. 1 foot planted firmly on Neo's chest. Neo's eye twitched. "Fweet! Fweet! I think I'm starting to hate ostriches." Neo re-triggered his blessings, allowing his injuries to heal. He walked back to the starting point. His steps were heavy with frustration beneath his calm expression. Percival seemed to be getting dragged by an ostrich. Neo's brows twitched as he watched the absurd sight. Percival's limp body left a trail on the dirt. His arms swayed lifelessly as the large bird towed him back effortlessly. "Sometimes the mind gets stunned due to repeated deaths," Cain explained, not looking particularly concerned. He leaned his legs on the wooden fence and sunk into the chair. "Since he can't move right now, Momathy is helping him get back." "Momathy?" Neo repeated in a flat voice. "Yeah, Momathy is that one." Cain gestured lazily. "Dorothy is the one who's been drinking juice this whole time, and Timothy is the one who's been laughing at you. The oldest is Timothy, then Momathy, then Dorothy. Momathy, the second eldest, finally reached the starting point and lowered Percival onto the ground carefully. It did so gently. Then, to Neo's disbelief, the ostrich gave a small bow, as if apologizing. And with that, it disappeared. Percival gasped awake. His eyes darted around. His expression shifted between confusion and simmering irritation. "Welcome back," Cain greeted with a smirk. "Good work out there." "Tisk." Percival clicked his tongue and stood up, dusting off his clothes. He exhaled sharply. Without wasting another second, he reactivated his blessing. Golden flames surged around his body as he bolted forward at full speed, only to die before a second had even passed. His body vanished. A moment later, he walked back to the starting point, his steps slower this time. Frustration was clear on his face. "I'm going to boil them when I catch them with these hands," he muttered darkly as his fingers twitched in irritation and anticipation. His words were intense. Neo felt the same. It was one thing to be outsped, But it was another thing to be mocked while losing. Neo was about to try again when he suddenly stopped. As much as he hated to admit it, he couldn't outspeed the bird brain. Not now. He needed to try something else. Shadow jump doesn't work. What about something else? Neo frowned. He didn't have any movement spells. Incantations with air or space elementals. That could work, especially thanks to his trait. Closing his eyes, he took a deep breath, pushing aside his irritation. Air. A soft breeze stirred around him. Green motes of light flickered into existence. The tiny elementals playfully floated around him. What is it? What is it? The elementals' voices echoed in his mind, light and whimsical. You want our help? Help. Yes. Neo wants our help. Hee. Neo wants our help. The elementals giggled and swirled around him like children playing a game. Neo noticed something strange. He could hear the air elementals talking among themselves. Should we help him? Let's help him. I want to fly around. Let's fly. Fly. I don't like him. Let's not help him. The elementals' opinions were all over the place. Some zipped around him eagerly, while others floated aimlessly, indifferent. Neo's brows furrowed slightly. Before, when his trait was grade 5, he couldn't hear them converse with each other. When I asked for help to bloom flowers, I never noticed internal debates or anything similar. It made me wonder how all elementals always came to the same decision. His gaze deepened as the realization settled in. I guess the problem had been my trait. It was too low-level before.
Hello everyone. We now have a Discord server. Join us for faster updates, discussions about your favorite novels, and exclusive Discord-only content. Don't miss out. See you there. Scan the QR code on the screen or enter any of the displayed links into your browser to join our Discord.